This meeting is held in accordance with the Freedom of Information Act. The news media has been notified, and a copy of the agenda has been made available to the public. This meeting is open to the public, and the public is welcome to attend in person. All persons wishing to attend the meeting by virtual means may do so via YouTube Sumter School District Board meeting and Sumter School District Facebook page. Vision. Sumter School District is committed to educating, empowering, and enriching the lives of all students to reach their full potential. Mission. Sumter School District is committed to providing a safe, nurturing, and high-quality educational environment that supports diversity and equips students for local and global success. Your board members are Barbara Jackson, Area 7 Chairwoman; Dr. J. Frank Baker, Seat 8 Vice Chair; Dr. Darrell McGaney, Area 5 Clerk; Mr. Brian Alston, Area 1; Mrs. Cheryl Ray, Area 2; Mr. Matthew McLeod, Area 3; Dr. John B. Hilton, Area 4; Dr. Gloria Rose Lee, Area 6; Dr. Sean Reagan, Seat 9; Dr. Penelope Martin Knox, our Superintendent; and Mrs. Amy Hanson, our Administrative Manager. This meeting is now called to order. Welcome to Sumter High School. I want to thank Principal Nicholas Pearson and his staff for hosting this meeting. We certainly do appreciate your kindness in every way you've shown us thus far. We do appreciate you, Mr. Pearson. Are there any objections to the approval of the agenda? Hearing none, the agenda is approved. Per our agenda, the board will now enter into executive session. Attorney Dave Duff informed me earlier today that no legal updates will be shared in executive session, and therefore legal topics will not need to be included in the motion to enter into executive session. As a reminder, there is no set time for this portion of the meeting. We invite our in-person guests as well as our online viewers to join us again when we return to the open session. If you are unable to be with us upon our return, we wish for you a pleasant, safe week. Trustees, is there a motion to enter into executive session?
Madam Chairwoman, I move that we enter into executive session regarding personnel matters regarding the superintendent search and conducting finalist interview.
Is there a second?
Second.
There is a motion and a second that the board enters into executive session for the personnel matter regarding the superintendent search and conducting final interviews. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote by show of hand. The motion passes, and the board has now returned to open session. Trustees, on the board communication. Hearing none, Dr. Hilton, do you have any information to report for legislative update?
Yes, ma'am. The legislative update has been loaded into board docs for your information and study.
Thank you, Dr. Hilton. Under the committee reports, the Citizen Advisory Committee will meet prior to the end of the school year and a date will be determined upon confirmation of schedules. Mr. Reagan, do you have an update for Facilities Committee?
The Facilities Committee plans to meet May 18th at 6 o'clock p.m. at the district office. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Reagan. Mrs. Ray, do you have a Finance Committee recommendation or report?
Finance Committee will meet May 16th at 6 o'clock at the district office.
Thank you, Mrs. Ray. Mr. Alston, Policy Committee?
Yes, ma'am. The Policy Committee will meet on May 12th at 6 p.m. at the district office.
Okay.
We got it covered. We got it covered.
All right. We will, do we have any, the next item on the agenda would be the division report from the Office of Finance. Dr. Martin Knox, would you please proceed and ask your district staff to proceed with those items listed under this section?
Yes, ma'am. Good evening, Dr. Jackson, Chairwoman, Vice Chairman Dr. Baker, members of the Sumter School District Board, and members of the Sumter School District community who are joining us this evening in person and those who are joining us on YouTube. At this time, I'd ask Ms. Miller, the Chief Financial Officer, to provide us with an update on items 6.1, 6.2, 6.3, and 6.4. At this time, Ms. Miller, the floor is yours.
Good evening, Chairwoman Dr. Barbara Jackson, Vice Chairman Dr. Frank Baker, honorable board members, and Superintendent Dr. Martin Knox. This evening, we have the March 31st, 2022 revenue and expenditures for the general fund. Revenue projections did decrease by approximately $720,000 from last month. This is a result of revenue being adjusted for the 135th day count, which declined by approximately 100 students from the 45th day projections. The 3,300 revenue codes were decreased by an additional $370,000 based on the state's projections. The additional revenue codes 3,100s have also been adjusted by a decrease of $400,000. This brings the projected revenue for fiscal year 22 to $126,897,605. Next, moving on to the expenditures, we are continuing to evaluate salaries and benefits. As previously discussed, as we proceed through the year, our projection of payroll becomes more precise. At this time, we reduced the payroll projection by approximately $1.4 million. This takes the overall expenditure projection to $128,018,624. The combined adjustments will result in a change in fund balance of approximately $1.2 million. And at this time, I will turn it over to Dr. Martin Knox.
So good evening again to our board trustees and to our members of the community. As a result of the figures that Ms. Miller just shared with you, and as we are looking forward to the 2022-2023 school year, I'd like to make the community aware, as well as our board, that moving forward in the fall, we will offer a retention stipend for all of those who are contributing to the well-being and the development of our children. This would include all support staff and all teaching staff. Those who are full-time will receive a retention stipend of $1,000, and those who are part-time will receive a retention stipend of $500. This will take effect in the fall, and as our original retention stipend included all staff, it excludes the superintendent. So as we are moving forward, we want to thank our staff for giving of our children and giving of themselves. So again, in the fall, we will give all full-time staff $1,000 retention stipend, part-time staff $500, and that would also include those who are signing on to take this journey with our children in the fall. Thank you.
All right, before we move over to the capital projects, are there any questions on the general fund?
I have a question,
Okay, Dr. Hilton?
if I may. So the stipend will be for those who are here now and who remain until next year, and it will also be for those that we're hiring now? It will be for new hires, folks coming on new next year?
Yes, sir. It would be for those staff who are returning in the fall and for our new hirees as well.
Thank you.
All right, you have the capital bond projects in front of you, starting with Fund 519 all the way through Fund 527. If you have any questions on those, I'll be happy to take those. All right, hearing none, moving over to the 8% bond proposed capital projects. You have this information in front of you. You can see here our total bond issuance is $5,857,000. It is broken out between the maintenance and the information and technology departments. Starting with the maintenance, we have approximately $2,680,000 budgeted, starting with number one is some AC unit replacements. You have the information listed there as far as locations. We also have a phase 2 of HVAC replacement for $320,000. That's at Pacala Springs. The next is our security door projects. Again, the schools are listed there with a budget of approximately $250,000. Number 4 is the serving line at Millwood Elementary. This is, oh, I'm sorry, I skipped over the, no, that is right, serving line at Millwood for $55,000. Number 5 is the stadium at Crestwood High School, $250,000. Number 6 is roofing repairs, as recommended by our consultants, for $1,250,000. Number 7 is our HVAC unit replacements per work orders, $135,000. Number 8 is a food service item of fry battery replacements, and it's got the schools listed there, $90,000. Number 9 is our marquees upgrades and replacements. The schools are listed for $80,000. And number 10 is a library circulation desk for Sumter High School for $40,000. Again, that total is $2,680,000. Moving down to page 2, you have your information system and technology. Item 1 is 1,000 teacher and staff desktops for $1,500,000. Number 2 is 150 teacher laptops for $300,000. Number 4 is 450 laptops for staff, $450,000. And then lastly, number 4, our student Chromebooks for $927,000. The total for the information system and technology is $3,177,000. And again, that total between the two is $5,857,000. Are there any questions?
Are there any questions for Ms. Miller?
All right, moving down to our last item, we have the general fund budget for fiscal year 2022-23. I would like to recognize it's a team effort during the budget process. Thank you to all of our principals, executive team members, and the finance department for their input and assistance with preparing the proposed budget and always putting children first with every decision. On the next slide, you will see there are 2 versions of the projected revenue. As we met last month, I presented information that was from the original version. That's your first column there, and you can see the total revenue projected increase was $11,300,000. The Senate version of the budget varies significantly from the House version, and you can see there is actually a decrease of revenue of $4,700,000 between the 2 budgets. So what we have done tonight is provided 2 versions for the board to review. Again, the difference between these 2, the original version has the new state funding method that was completely different from our base student cost. The Senate version took a combination. They are taking what districts are currently receiving under the current allocation, and then the new money is being allocated based on the new funding method. So it is a combination. Under the House version, there was a $4,000 increase for teachers. That is why that revenue was higher. And under the Senate version, it is only a $2,000 increase for teachers. Therefore, the revenue did decrease by $4.7 million. Moving down to the expenditures, you will see again the 2 versions. The first one is what we discussed last month, $10,500,000. The difference between the House version and the Senate version, the only difference is in the teachers line item there. You can see that the expenditure decreased by $2.7 million. So this takes the revenue down to, or the expenditures to $7,800,000. Now, if you move to the next slide, you have the summary here that our revenue decreased $4.7 million, while our expenditures only decreased $2.7 million. That means we are worse off with the Senate version of the proposed budget by $2 million. And we would need to have local funding to make up that difference if that version passes. When we spoke last month, we talked about the meetings that were being held with departments and principals, and while we talked about mandated expenditure increases, we also do need to address department and school level budget necessities. These are necessary expenditures. They're not mandated, but they are very much necessary to continue the operation of our district. Operating expenses, we all know we are facing inflation at the current time. We looked at all the different departments, and we did a very modest increase of $690,000 for all departments. This is a minimal amount needed. We are facing rising costs from all our vendors, all departments. This was not adding any other expenses. This was just taking into consideration the price increases. We did actually receive an email last week about utility costs and that they could go up 12%. We currently, I calculated that today, that would be $300,000 alone just in our utility bills going up. So I've only used $690,000 as an increase. So this is a very necessary increase. There is an Office of Academic position that is, with the increase in state requirements, there is an additional support position that is necessary to maintain compliance with laws and regulations. Again, a necessary position that is included in this. And then special service positions, there are 3 of those. We need a sign language interpreter, a school counselor to be in compliance with state regulations, and then a speech and language pathologist. Again, necessary positions that are needed. And then lastly, there is a step increase for our non-teaching staff. Please note that this is just a step increase. At a max, that would be approximately 2%, and in some cases, it will only be a 1% increase for staff. Cost of living went up 4.7%, so we were only giving a 1 to 2% increase for these non-teaching staff. So again, we did include that in a necessary increase, and that's about $630,000. So a total of the necessary expenditures, $1,641,000. The next slide, we talk about the other financing sources. Again, this is a decrease of $3.6 million because in both versions, the House and the Senate, they are still combining line items. So revenue that used to be recorded in other funds is now being moved over to the general fund and rolled up, which means we need to bring those expenditures over as well. So they really just offset each other. And then lastly, we have a slide here that just shows the overall figures between the 2 versions of the budget. You can see the original version, the revenue was $145,178,941. You've got your expenditures there. I'm not going to read all the numbers to you, but the shortfall under the original version, as we discussed last month, was $1,407,728. And then if you look at the Senate version, again, that was about a $2 million change in that, so we have a shortfall of $3,378,075. It's also important to remember that in both of these budget versions, we still have frozen vacancy positions. There's approximately $700,000 of necessary positions that we have froze. So that does not include this number. You would have to add that to that number if we were to unfreeze those positions. Also, you have to keep in mind that $2.4 million of salaries is being paid out of ESSER funds. So again, you'd have to add that to this if we put those expenditures back in the general fund. So yes, it is a shortfall of $1.4 million, but if you include those 2 items, it's actually a shortfall of $4.5 million. So when those ESSER funds are no longer available and when we need those positions, we have a big gap that needs to be filled. And that's just on the House version. If you actually look at the Senate version, you're actually short $6,478,075. So I just want to make sure the board is aware of that we have those 2 things that are being paid by other sources right now or not being utilized. We're not filling those positions. Also keep in mind that this is with our support staff only receiving a 1 to 2% increase while cost of living went up 4.7%. We do have some options that we have discussed as an executive team on how to offset the shortfall. We could utilize a vacancy allowance and not fill all the vacancies next year. We have vacancies right now, and we could put a cap on filling those to make sure we don't go over budget and just try to pass the budget knowing we need to utilize those vacancies. I think we could handle a $1.4 million with that scenario, but I'm not sure we can handle $3.3 million based on vacancies. We could request a millage increase from the county based on the allowable millage rate increase. We are allowed to increase 11 mills, or approximately $2.1 million. Of course, that would have to go to the county and be approved by the county council. This would result in still needing $878,000, even if we did get all of that millage increase. But we could use a vacancy allowance to offset that as well. The other option that we have is with the Senate version of the funding, the way the law is written, it is a $2,000 increase to the state's minimum teacher scale. Sumter School District does pay more once you get past 2 years of experience than what the state does. So we could only increase teacher salaries that have 2 years of experience or less to meet the state law with paying $2,000 higher, starting the salary at $38,000 as opposed to $36,000. We could save $2.5 million by only giving that increase to those with the first 2 levels of experience. That would mean any teacher that has worked more than 2 years would not get that $2,000 increase, because it's not mandated that you give that. It's just mandated that you pay $2,000 higher than the state scale, which we already do once you get to 3 years or more experience. We could remove the step for all other staff. We could cut operating expenditures by not performing repairs and maintenance that are much needed. We could not hire those special service positions that are needed for compliance, and that would still leave us with $1.7 million to come up with, which we could use a vacancy allowance for that. And then lastly, we could utilize the fund balance as a one-year solution. However, that, again, in the long term, that is not a permanent solution because you would eventually eliminate the fund balance. So there are, and those are reoccurring expenditures. It's not like these would be one-time expenses, and then the next year we would be okay to not use the fund balance. They will be reoccurring, so you would have to use that every year, and you eventually would deplete your fund balance. So we do have some decisions to make, but we do need to wait until we know which version is passed. The state is meeting again tomorrow and Wednesday, and I have a finance roundtable on Thursday, so I hope to have more information by Thursday, and we'll provide an update in the superintendent's update on Friday, and give the board some more information on how we need to proceed. They do have until May 12th to make their decision, so we could be just waiting that long until we know what our true revenue is going to be. And at this time, I am happy to take any questions.
Are there any questions for Ms. Miller?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I don't really have a question. It's really more so a request for the Office of Finance. And I don't know if this has ever been done before. If the district had not experienced a deficit, is there a way to project where our fund balance will be with the steps that we've taken to recover from that deficit? Like a financial analysis of a forecast of potentially where we would be at?
We have not done that. I'm sure we could, but I'm not sure where that would get us by looking back at what's happened in the past. I think we need to focus on the future and coming up with solutions on how to move forward.
Well, I will ask if it's the will of this board, just so that we can have a perspective of where things are. And I only ask that question because I know that with the deficit and with the lack of support that we receive over the years from not getting millage increases, it has impacted our general fund. And so I think it will be helpful for us to just be able to see or be able to forecast where we could have been or where we should be. And I think it's helpful for the community as well to be able to see that.
I think we could definitely come up with the calculation if we had received the millage increase. I know each year it rolls off. You can only look back 3 years. So I have the historical data that I could look and see how much we have. I can compile that.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Any additional questions? Yes, Dr. Baker?
Ms. Miller, or even Dr. Martin Knox, clarify you said these are necessary positions, but then you said it's a possibility to balance the budget, we could cut these positions. So what's the State Department saying we got to do, basically?
There is a requirement for these positions. Counselors, it's based on a student ratio, so we would be running the risk of not being in compliance if we did not hire some of these positions that were requested.
Okay, the Office of Academic Position, what does that entail, Dr. Martin Knox?
So there are a couple of positions that were in there that we toggled with, and as Ms. Miller stated, when we met as an executive team, we had to kind of prioritize, if you will. And so the one we were left remaining, which one was the one that we left off with? Because I know there was the one for
There
Power
were
School.
probably 4 positions that we were talking about.
But we narrowed it down.
We narrowed it down. Let me see if I have my note in here of which position.
So we
were-
had 4, and we narrowed it down and prioritized, and so we came up with the one. I just don't remember what that specific one was.
So
But it was
basically,
about compliance.
if the decision was not to fill these positions, we get a gig from the State Department.
Yes,
Is
sir.
what you're saying?
sir.
Yes.
If I'm understanding
That's
correctly.
correct. We'd be out of
So really,
compliance.
they got our hands tied.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Nothing we can do.
What was that one? What's the one that came up with the final one?
I don't think we ever finalized an exact position because we were still trying to decide the specific need. I know we talked about some of the STEM positions, but we were going to try to use grants and write a grant to try to fill those, and this was one that we just wouldn't be able to write a grant for, and it was more of a compliance side and making sure we had somebody that could help with all the compliance.
And because we had minimized many of the positions that were in academics and the roles and responsibilities that each one of our staff members takes on each and every day, they're actually taking on the role of 2 people. And I think Dr. Hilton mentioned it one time, I think it was the last time when we hired Mr. Phillips in his position, because he's responsible for the academia, responsible for science, with the arts, and there's just so many other responsibilities he has. And so we were looking at which one, again, prioritizing would give us more support for our schools and the academic programming. So we knew we needed one, but we did not leave off with a finite one because we have so many needs to meet the needs of our academic program.
And my other question, if I heard you correctly, you said if council chose to fund us, that we are up now to 11 meals that they would owe us, basically, or we would be eligible to receive.
Yes, sir.
Okay, and that kind of goes back to, I think, part of what Mr. Austin's question was, and you can do the historical perspective and come back with that. And I agree, that's important information to have.
We actually have that data because it has been discussed. I think the last time we did the budget presentation last year, we had the historical analysis. If we had these, the specific number of mills that we were due, if you will, where we would be. So we do have that.
And I have some in front of me right now. 2017, there was 2 mills we could have received. 2018, there was 3.4 mills we could have received. 2019 was 3.9 mills. So I can compile it and
And
go
my
back even
last
further.
question, have you been able to get a figure for the worth of the mill from the county yet?
We are still working on that. I have talked to them. We are working on the growth factor. I did attend their last meeting, and they were working on that still. They did not have all the final reports yet from the assessor.
Thank you.
And one question here. When do we plan to go before council asking for some support?
That was in discussion. Usually it's happening in May, so we will reach out with the county and firm that up. But it typically happens around mid-May.
Okay, thank you.
And to your point, Dr. Jackson, before we go into county council, we will have the conversation with the board to seek guidance in terms of the direction in which we would like to go as a district as a whole, just to meet some of the, looking at some of the scenarios that we have before us, just making sure the ask is something that's going to be beneficial, and we're not asking just for the sake of asking, but because of need.
Thank you. Are there any additional questions for Ms. Miller or Dr. Martin Knox?
Thank you, Ms. Miller.
Okay. We're now down to required actions. So, trustees, is there a motion as it relates to the 8% bond project?
Recommendation by Dr. Martin Knox.
Do you have a recommendation, Dr. Martin Knox?
Yes, ma'am. I ask the board to approve the 8% bond projects that were presented this evening by Ms. Miller.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that the board approves the 8% bond project.
Second.
Okay, there is a motion and a second that the board approves the 8% bond project. Is there any discussion? Do everyone have their, do you want us to vote by show of hands? Okay. Would you please cast your vote on your computer? Dr. Baker's
Mine didn't come up, Amy.
didn't come up. Just show you. Raise.
I raised my hand.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. Dr. Martin Knox, the first reading of the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget.
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Jackson. I ask the board to support the first reading of the 2023 proposed budget as shared by Ms. Miller this evening.
Madam Chair, I'd like to make a motion that we approve first reading of the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget action.
Second.
There is a motion and a second that the board approves the first reading of the fiscal year 2023 proposed budget. Is there any discussion? Please cast your vote. Dr. Baker's didn't
Not
come up
again,
again.
Amy. Yeah, I did.
Okay, the motion passes unanimously. All righty. And the consent agenda will be with the April 11th meeting and will be presented for approval at our next meeting. I'd like to thank everyone for being with us this evening. I'd like for you to just continue to be safe, and if there is no further business, this meeting is adjourned at 9:17. Thank you. Drive safely and be blessed.